All right, good morning, folks. Y'all grab some seats. We'll go ahead and kick this thing off. Appreciate y'all coming this morning. All right, well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate y'all's interest in New Braunfels Utilities and what we're up to. And I want to start off by saying, I know I've said this a few times, but I mean it. It's been a hard summer for electric customers in New Braunfels and truly across, excuse me, across the state of Texas, with a number of things that have been going on that have been impacting electric prices. NBU's been out at certain public meetings and other opportunities to talk about this, and we've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of feedback, and we've collected all of those. And what we wanted to do was hold these forums where we'd have an opportunity to share the answers to the questions that we have, that we received, and also provide an opportunity to get one-on-one assistance to you for questions or anything else that you have. We have a whole bunch of NBU employees here that have pushed pause on their job to come here and help out today, this morning, and this evening too. So with that, I'll go ahead and get this kicked off. First question that I think really is the lead off. We put these in order, these questions, because I think they build on each other and help explain the next question. So it all starts at the electric bill. Everybody gets one every month. And what I want to do is explain this, because the way the bill is written right now, it's hard to understand. So what we've done here is we tried to put together a graphic that shows how each piece of the electric grid contributes to what's on the bill. And that's what's on the left. So the way the power gets to a home or a business, it starts with generation. There's some type of plant, whether it's coal or natural gas or nuclear, wind, solar, and a variety of other smaller types. The next piece after it leaves the generation facility is it goes through an electric transmission network. And those are the big lines that you see when you drive down the road. That's the middle one there on the left. And then the bottom one is what folks refer to as distribution. So after transmission, it goes down to a lower voltage, a distribution voltage, and that's the next and final piece that takes it from that point all the way to homes and businesses. Then in the middle column, what we have there are the line items on the bill as they read today. I'm going to go through in just a second, but what we've done on the right are put some new labels there, and what we're calling them is some proposed bill item labels that we're going to revise the bill and go ahead and get that changed here pretty quick once we get some terms that make sense to folks, and hopefully we'll get some feedback on that today from you all that are here. So if you start the first one, there's two items there. There's purchase power, that's that middle column, and then there's this power cost recovery adjustment, this four-letter acronym. And I'm going to go through several slides after this to talk through what exactly that means, because it's complicated, and that's why I think there's so many questions about it. So I have several slides to help explain what it is and how it's calculated. But if you go over to the right from there, what we're trying to do is break those two items, purchase power and the power cost recovery adjustment, the PCRA, into what they actually are. And so the first piece and the biggest piece is generation. So in that PCRA, there's a generation base rate, and that's common utility rate design, where you have a certain amount that is in the rate that covers the base rate, and the base rate it's an assumption that it'll usually not be lower than that. Sometimes it is, but most often not. And then the other piece is variable. It's called generation above base rate, and I'll show you a number of slides as we get into this that shows why it's variable. It's variable because the market goes up and down. I'll get into the detail on that in a minute. The next item that we have there is called replenishing reserves. So we're going to talk about Winter Storm Uri as well. One of the things that we did in Winter Storm Uri was use our reserves to pay for those power costs during that time. And so the next step in that recovery is replenishing those reserves. That's also in that PCRA. And then transmission costs. Those are much smaller than the others, than generation, but those are part of that purchase power and PCRA as well. Again, more on that in just a moment. And then the bottom, the delivery charge is, we're thinking about changing that to delivery cost. What that is, it's a variable rate, and it really is what it takes to have the distribution system available and ready for the amount of electricity that's being used by the customer. And then finally, the last one, the service availability cost, that is a fixed fee every month. And so what utilities do is there's a certain amount of expense that's required just to maintain a meter, just to maintain an account. And so that's why it's a flat amount, whether there's any use or not. There's certain activities that have to happen just to maintain that. And so those are the items that link to those others that are currently on the bill. And what I'm going to do next is go through a deeper explanation of each of these, and I'll try to explain it from different perspectives, different point of views, to really try to hone in on the full meaning of it. So what this is a slide showing on the left, that bar on the left it shows a residential bill breakdown in July of 2021. And it assumes 1,800 kilowatt hours. That was the average residential use in July of this year. And then on the right, it shows what the bill was in July of 2022, assuming 1,800 kilowatt hours. Now what you see on the bottom, the gray one and the green one and that, whatever color that is above the green, those smaller ones, those are, as you can see there on the bottom, if you can't read that, we're gonna have it in the back when we're done here. It's that fixed charge for service availability. It's the distribution pieces, it's the delivered power and the transmission. So the generation piece is the big blue one, which is the base rate, and the orange one, which is what I was mentioning a moment ago, is the cost of the power to NBU above what the base rate collected in revenue. And then the light blue one on the top, that's what we're calling Winter Storm Uri recovery, all right? We've done some things NBU has during this that we could have done better. And one of the things for sure is we could have taken that Winter Storm Uri recovery off this summer. When prices in ERCOT went high and demand went high because of this record heat that we had, we should have taken that off, and that's my responsibility, and I apologize for that. We're going to talk about Winter Storm Uri recovery in a little bit. I'll get into some details on that. But the point I want to make here is the PCRA. The PCRA is represented by that Winter Storm Uri recovery and that orange piece, the cost of power above what the base rate was collected. So it's not a fee, it's not a profit, it is essentially the cost of power plus the Winter Storm Uri recovery. There's another slide I'm going to talk about the power cost recovery adjustment. Like I said, I'm going to have multiple slides and talk about it in different ways to hopefully paint the full picture. The PCRA is a variable rate. Each electric utility has something like this because what they're buying, when they're buying those electrons, they're buying electricity, it's not a fixed price every month. It's different month to month, and so there's always some type of variable rate. We happen to call ours the PCRA. Some folks call it a fuel adjustment. Some people don't put it on the bill at all, and they just embed it in the full generation fee. And essentially what it is, I've got three descriptions there, 3 bullet points. It's the total cost of power above what is collected through the base rate. It's the cost of electric transmission, which is set by the Public Utility Commission annually. So the point there is that piece of transmission that I showed on that earlier slide, that one there in the middle, those big towers. This is how the state of Texas collects revenue for this thing, because it serves the whole state, right? So what the state does is they take the total dollar amount of transmission investment in the state of Texas, and then they divide it by how much each utility used in electricity, and then they send you the bill for the next year. So because they increase it each year, in the rate, what we have is a base rate for transmission when the rate was first designed, and then every year in the PCRA, there's this small incremental increase to represent the increase that the state of Texas is charging based on the build out of the transmission network. And then the third piece of the PCRA is the Uri recovery, which was paying off that note. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And once the note's paid off, replenishing reserves. So what I'm showing right here on the right, these 3 bars, it shows the PCRA for July and then what it is in August and what it'll be in September. So you can see the relative size of each one. The dark blue one is what's represented as the cost to buy power in ERCOT above the base rate. The blue is that transmission cost. And then the gray, back in July, that was the final collection for the note for Winter Storm Uri. You can see that going forward in August and September, even though we've collected everything for the note we took out, some people have told me you should use the word line of credit, and that makes more sense to people. So if you think of it as a line of credit, we've collected what we need to pay that off, and I'll show you exactly what that's looked like over time in a future slide. The next step after doing that is replenishing our reserves. I'll talk about reserves a lot later. But you can see that in August and September, we have taken off that replenishing reserves. It won't be there for those 2 months. Okay, here's another slide. We're going to talk about it kind of graphically. I don't know about you, but I kind of like things in pictures. It helps me remember better. This shows the three different things, the three different items that feed into that blue circle, which is the PCRA. The one on the left, and I hate that there's all these four-letter acronyms, but it's somewhat complex. I talked about that cost of power above the base rate. Well, the technical term for that is the generation cost recovery factor. So that's the piece, that is the dark blue piece, all right? That's what that one is right there. The middle one is replenishing reserves, and that's the one, that's the one that's not on August and September. And then the green one on the right, this is the piece for transmission. And again, four-letter acronym, transmission cost recovery factor, and it captures the cost of transmission that the state of Texas assesses above what is in the base rate for transmission, and that changes annually. I'll show you a graphic later of what that looks like. So the green one is that light blue one right there. So what's the formula? This is another question we've had pretty often. It's a simple subtraction. So you start with the total generation and transmission costs that the utility was charged for a particular period of time, and then you add to it whatever reserves that you need to collect on, and then you subtract from that what's in the base rate for generation and transmission. And on the bill right now, that's called purchase power. Very confusing. That's why we're going to change it. The difference is the PCRA. There's another common question. Why not cap the PCRA? It's a great question, right? PCRA has become bigger than the base rate on the bill. Why not cap it? Because that's what's making the bill high. The PCRA, again, along with the base rate, reflects the total cost NBU pays electric generators for power. Every month, we buy power, and then we got to pay them. That's how it works. So if we capped the PCRA below what NBU paid for power, NBU would then be in default for non-payment. That's what it would mean to cap the PCRA. We can, however, there's that variable piece, right, that we do have control over. That's the rate at which we're replenishing reserves. We do control that. And I'm going to talk about reserves in a minute. Reserves, it's like a savings account, right? It's like an emergency fund. And it's there to protect the community from, like it says here, significant events such as Winter Storm Uri or any other event that might happen. A lot going on here, but it's an important one. So I'm going to talk through it and try to explain in detail what you're looking at. I got to put my glasses on, y'all. What this is showing is the NBU's monthly electric cost per kilowatt hour. In other words, what's the rate we're charging month by month? And by the way, this term kilowatt hour, electricity just doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, right, if you're not into it. But water does. I think we all know what a gallon is because we buy milk and that kind of thing, right? When you think about water, the total volume you're using each month, it's measured in gallons. Well, there's no gallons in electricity. They call it kilowatt hours. If you want to get into the calculation of that, that'd be a fun little thing to talk about later, but I doubt you're interested in it right now. Just keep in mind that when you see kilowatt hour for electric, that's the same thing as saying gallons in water, okay? So what you're seeing is the price per kilowatt hour that NBU has had for its electric service going back to 2018. And what we have stacked here are these different items that I started with in the presentation, the line items on the bill. So the green one on the bottom, and by the way, what's assumed in here is that flat fee, that availability charge of $17 per residential address. So that's not on the bar, but you see it on the bottom there. What you see in here are the variable pieces. So the green one is a delivery charge. That's NBU's cost just to operate the distribution system, okay? The blue is the purchase power base rate. So that is what is represented in ordinance. It's fixed. And you can see that it goes up and down. It goes up in the summer months because power costs more in the summer. That's why it's a little higher during those 4 months. And then it comes back down for the rest of the year. Then the green, that's the portion of the rate that reflects the cost of the power that NBU bought in ERCOT above the base rate. So if you take the green and the blue, the orange and the blue together, the orange and the blue is what NBU paid for power in ERCOT. And then when we buy that power in ERCOT, we pass it directly through to our customers with no markup. There's no profit There's none of that. It's just a direct pass-through. So it's a community service that NBU provides is what it is. You can see in 2020, some yellow shows up there. Some yellow shows up. And the reason that happened was because our CFO saw some things going on in the ERCOT market that looked like some volatility was about to happen and was happening. And she was concerned enough about that she went to the Board of Trustees and we said, hey, we feel like we need to increase our reserves because this market is behaving in a way that it hasn't before, and we feel like having more reserves on hand would be helpful to protect our customers and our community. So you can see that starting in January of 2020, going through October of 2020, that yellow piece is the amount that we put into the rate to add to the reserves to protect from volatility, protect our customers from those kinds of things. And I thanked her a lot when Winter Storm Uri got here, because you can see that Winter Storm Uri came in 2021, and because we had gone through that exercise, our reserves were bigger than they otherwise would have been. Still not enough. In fact, I don't know if anybody in the state of Texas had reserves big enough to handle what happened during Winter Storm Uri. More on that in just a moment. So then we get to March of 2021, and that's where you see that light blue start showing up. And so starting in March of 2021 all the way through July of 2022, NBU paid back a short-term note, line of credit if you will, to recover the total cost from Uri, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. And that was it. It was done. So that started in March of 2021, and that is we've now collected the full amount, $50 million, to pay off that note, whereas some have chosen to take out debt for 20 and 30 years, and I'll show you what it would have looked like if we had done 20 to 30 years here in just a moment. Now, we've shown this presentation to a handful of folks this week, just, hey, does this make sense? Is it clear? What can we put on here to change this? And we've done a number of things. One of the things that, one of the pieces of feedback we got that was good was, hey, is this the amount of electricity that was used? No, it's not. It's the cost per kilowatt hour that was charged month per month. And the feedback was, well, it might be helpful to see how much energy was used during those period of time too. And that was a great suggestion. So here it is. That black line shows how much energy was used in the NBU distribution system for each one of those months as well. Okay. Talked a lot about base rate earlier, right? So the cost of power has two components to it in the bill. There's this base rate that's fixed in ordinance. It goes up in the summer, then back down again. Well, each month, because it's a volatile market, ERCOT is, the cost of power goes up and down. And so what we're showing here is this line, this black line, this horizontal line is set at 0. The blue line, when it's at the black line, that means that the base rate covered the cost of power that month. If the blue line is below the black line, that means that that's how much the base rate did not cover the cost of power for that month. However, when the blue line's above the black line, it means the base rate collected more than what was needed. And so there was a credit that needed to go back. And you can see what's happening off to the right. You can see in this base rate coverage, and I'll show this to you in some other slides down the road here, where you're seeing what's happening in ERCOT right there. You're seeing what's happening in this market. Those spikes on the bottom are when prices went very high in ERCOT, and the base rate did not cover it. And the biggest one, that one that has the orange arrow pointed to it, that was Winter Storm Uri. So when it doesn't cover, that's when the PCRA needs to kick in to cover the full cost of the power. And that's what this is. So again, a lot on here. Let me walk you through this one. I'll start with the easy one. What you're seeing here is the orange line is the transmission cost recovery factor, right? Let me just go back to that slide just to get us all kind of oriented. Over there on the right, that green one. Remember the way state of Texas does it is they say, every year they say, hey, utility companies, this is your cost for transmission. It goes up every year. So we got a base rate set in ordinance, but since it goes up every year, we add that little bit, that incremental amount that they tell us we're gonna have to pay every year. So that's the green one, and so over here on this line, that's what's represented by that orange line. So you can see it doesn't go up a whole lot each year, but it has been going up. And as Texas has really built out its transmission network to bring that power from the renewables out in West Texas and fill other congestion areas, you can see it's kicking up even more as the transmission network has been building out. The blue line, The blue line is the GCRF. So let me go back again. That orange one on the left, the generation cost recovery factor, that's the variable piece that captures the cost of power that's either above or below the base rate, all right? So you can see this, and this starts in 2006 on the left and it goes all the way up to present time. You can see that it's been high in the past, but you can also see that it's dipped below zero at some points, meaning the base rate was more than what we were paying for the cost of power. So there have been times when the PCRA has been negative because of that. But because of what's happening in ERCOT, you can see how it's been escalating in the last year and a half. So let's talk about Uri. First of all, during Winter Storm Uri, the amount that NBU had to pay for power was equivalent in 1 week to what we had budgeted for the entire year. It wasn't just a New Braunfels thing, it was an entire ERCOT-wide thing. You can see we got a quote here from, from this article from Forbes where they consolidated a bunch of information that came out afterwards. The energy costs in ERCOT during that week were estimated across the entire state, across all of ERCOT, to be $16 to $26 billion more than usual. So what happened in New Braunfels is what happened across the state, but our hedging program protected us, and I'll show you that in just a moment, how it protected us. So what do we do to pay for it? Those two blue things are what we used to pay for it. First, we had $43 million in cash reserves. We applied those, and by the way, that's not the total reserves of the utility. The way you manage a reserve policy, which is overseen by the Board of Trustees, is that you have reserves for certain incidents, certain activities, certain risks that may happen to the utility, and you fund those based on the probability of it and its impact to the utility. So those cash reserves were specifically for this program. And then we took out a taxable short-term note in the amount of, we drew down $50 million from that line of credit, if you will. That was some of the feedback we got too. Don't call it a note, call it a line of credit. It's easier to understand. So we drew down about $50 million from that. So we had to pay all those costs the next month. That's how ERCOT works. They don't take rain checks. There's no IOUs. They say, hey, we deliver power, pay for it. So in March of 2021, we paid them $93 million, and we started at that point on the recovery plan. And this is what it has looked like over time. So there are three different milestones that I'm going to read you here on the left column. And then each subsequent column is the target that we had for those milestones as time has gone by. The reason the targets have changed is because the cost of power in ERCOT has gone up so much that we've had to extend the period of time that we were planning, to collect this money and replenish the reserves. So if you start at the top milestone on the left, the first target was collecting $50 million for the taxable note. And let me go backwards again, just to kind of, I'm a visual guy. If you are too, maybe this will help. That light blue piece over there, right? Kind of towards the right. That was the portion of the rate that we used to collect the $50 million. And it's been going on since March of 2021. It finished in July of 2022. So the original plan was to finish in March of 2022. But because the cost of power had gone up so much in ERCOT, we had to change that. We had to change the milestone to July of 2022. We pushed it out. The next target we had was to get the power stabilization. Well, we call it the power. This is feedback we got too. What's the power stabilization fund? That's the word that we use for those reserves that we use for the power supply program. So one of the milestones was to have $20 million in the power stabilization fund. And when we first kicked this off in April of 2021, if market conditions had stayed the same, we would have done that by November of 2022. Now we're looking at next July of 2023. And then that fund, those reserves full, we originally had planned on fiscal year 2026. But because of what's happened in the market, we're now pushing that out to fiscal year 2030. There's been some questions, why in the world do you have a target fund balance of 365 days of power? And it's because of this. It's because in 1 week in 2021, because of what happened in the ERCOT market, we incurred an entire year's worth of power supply costs in 1 week. That's where the 365 days comes from. Let me talk through this too. This is an important slide. And what it's doing here, it's showing two things. It shows what would it look like if NBU had decided to take out a 30-year note, 30-year bond, something like that. It'd be taxable too, because this is, if we were building, when we build capital and those kinds of things, they're not taxable. This would be taxable. We'd be paying taxes on this and more interest. That's the orange line, okay? The blue line is what we did and what we're forecasting it will look like going forward. So the scale on the left is the cents per kilowatt hour. So let me go backwards again just to get everybody oriented. It's like this, okay? On this chart, we also have the price per kilowatt hour. So you can see that the blue bars, the light blue bars for the Winter Storm Uri recovery, I'm going to show you what those correlate to on this slide that we're looking at now. It's where the blue dots are, okay? So from March of 2021 through this past July, we were at just over 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And then fiscal year 23, it's going to drop down. Fiscal year 24, it's going to drop down again. If we had taken out a 30-year note, we would have been just under a cent all the way out to fiscal year 30, and then we continue paying until fiscal year 2051. So by doing the short-term note instead of the long-term, this community is going to realize a savings of $44 million. And that doesn't even include the taxes over that period of time as well. $44 million is like a wastewater plant expansion. That's a significant amount of money. So this is what it looks like on a bill. So this fiscal year, by the way, our fiscal year starts August 1. We're in it right now. We're not currently replenishing the reserves, but when we start replenishing again, the plan is to do that at 1.3 cents per kilowatt hour. That's what that blue dot is there. You can see my pointer. That's what that is right there. And then next year, all the way through 2030, and that's about $15.60 per bill. And then next year, all the way to 2030, it drops down to 0.075, and that's this here, all the way on this line. That's about $9 a month. And then we'll have 365 days worth of power costs in the fund. This is where it stands right now, but I just showed you this. We've been moving these targets, trying to balance two things, trying to balance, number one, the cost on our customers' bills, and at the same time, providing financial resilience to the utility, which ultimately protects our customers and utility bill costs. Which leads me to the bond rating. There's been a lot of questions about the bond rating. Has it gone up? Has it gone down? What's going on? Well, there are 3 rating agencies, and this summer, for the last few months, they've all came in one after the other to go through a rating for us. And what I'm showing here on this chart, we've got all 3 agencies there. You can see on the column on the left. And then as you follow the columns over, you see what our pre-summer rating was and what our current rating is. It also shows the outlook. And this is something, most people are familiar with the rating itself, whatever that letter ends up being. Some people aren't familiar. They actually assign an outlook too. What do they think is going to happen? Is it going to go up, going to go down, is it going to stay the same? You can see it's negative for every one of them. And I will tell you that that's what it's been for pretty much every electric utility in the state of Texas. And it's because of the uncertainty in ERCOT right now. We'll talk about that in just a moment. There's just a lot of changes going on. And, rating agencies, they don't like that. They don't like changes. They like certainty. They like fixed things. And when they see things are uncertain or volatile, they say negative. So for S&P, they maintained our rating, A+. For Fitch, they dropped us from AA to AA-. I'll show you where we rank here in just a moment with those ratings. And then Moody's, they kept us the same too. So 2 out of 3 kept us the same. Fitch dropped us. What this is the Fitch bond rating comparisons for public power utilities. In other words, municipal utilities or electric co-ops. And you probably can't read that, and I apologize. Up here in the AA median, or the AA category, prior to this summer, it was only Austin Energy and NBU up here. We had the highest rating we could have had. So this rating that Fitch just did, they dropped us to AA-. So now we're down here with Bryan Texas Utilities, CPS Energy, Garland Power and Light, Pedernales Electric. A+ is Brownsville. You've heard me talk about Brownsville before. They're the only utility in Texas like us, meaning water, sewer, and electricity under a board of trustees. So we use them as a benchmark fairly often. City of Denton is also A+, GVEC A+, Seguin A-. So you can see while Fitch dropped us, we're in pretty good company right here. Talk about this at the council meeting. Some of y'all have seen this. Why are the bills higher? What is going on? What's causing all this? So with all this background that I just gave you on the bills and PCRA, ERCOT, transmission, the note and everything, what is causing all this to happen? The first is the state of Texas' response to Winter Storm Uri. Y'all might have remembered that during Uri, the legislature was actually in session, and they went to work very quickly and passed quite a bit of legislation to put reforms in place at the Public Utility Commission of Texas, and then ERCOT, which is regulated by the Public Utility Commission of Texas. And when they did that, what happened was the Public Utility Commission of Texas came out and said, we're going to redesign the market to prioritize reliability over price. Because up until that time, price really is what led. And so you'd often hear, I'm sure y'all heard this in the news, it still kind of happens now, but not nearly as much as it used to. ERCOT would have an appeal for conservation. And then we would take their message and repeat that for them, because that's how the market was back then. They were prioritizing price. What the PUC has said now is we don't want to do that anymore. We don't want to have people conserve. We just want stuff to work. And that's what they're doing. But it's a balance, right? Because if you want higher reliability, it costs more. And so they've been implementing reforms that would increase the reliability to try to prevent a Uri from happening again or anything like it. But it's also caused the cost of electricity to go up. And you see some items there that are examples of that. They're now moving into phase 2 of the market redesign. They've completed phase 1. It's a 2-step process. They're moving into phase 2 right now. And I think that's one of the reasons the rating agencies are saying outlook negative, because they know there's more to come, but we don't know what that is yet. Natural gas prices have gone up. So you can see that we were at about $3 a couple years ago, and we're almost at 10 now. It's like a 3-time increase, y'all. That is a significant increase. And you might look, one of the questions we've had is, well, you know what, Ian? It was high in the past. Didn't affect electric bills back then. That's right. That's right. And the reason that is because the ERCOT generation fleet and the ERCOT grid is not what it was back then. And the key things that are different right now is that back then, you basically had a generation fleet that was coal and natural gas. And what's happened over that time, when fracking especially came on the scene, natural gas prices plummeted, and that's why you see it so low right there in those years in recent history. It made coal no longer competitive. So you saw natural gas additions. And then what happened, because renewables became so competitive, they became a much bigger portion of the ERCOT grid. So what we have right now is an ERCOT grid that was coal and natural gas. And what you have right now is a grid that's about 44% natural gas and about 30% renewable. Here's why that's important with natural gas. With renewable generation, and that's usually solar and wind, it's either on or it's off. That means the folks in the control room in ERCOT can't call up the plant and say, we need you to increase your generation. It's not possible. Either the wind's blowing or the sun's shining, and they're going to put maximum output based on wind or sun. That means it's not dispatchable. Dispatchable means kind of like you have a 911 dispatch. They dispatch whoever they need, that first responder, to go respond. It's the same thing with generation fleet. The control room folks dispatch electric resources to do what they need to do to keep the grid stable. So natural gas right now really is the predominant dispatchable resource in ERCOT. There's also nuclear. There always has been nuclear, but it's just such a smaller piece nowadays that natural gas is the dominant generation source. And because of that, the cost of natural gas drives the cost of ERCOT in the last few years, and it's becoming even more so now. So this is there's this really incredible federal database. It's called the U.S. Energy Information Administration. You would not believe how much information they collect. It is incredible. You can look up anything. They issued a report back in June that predicted energy prices across the United States would increase. And if you look at the amount they're looking at, it was dramatic. And they cited it because the cost of fossil fuel was going up. Yeah, natural gas, but coal was going up as well. So what you see here on this list, you see ERCOT down there, it's highlighted in yellow. All these others are different energy, power markets. electricity markets in the United States. There's markets all over the country, and you can see the little map of the U.S. over there with arrows pointing to where each one of those markets are located. But if you look at, there's two things I want to point out here. Number one, they're all predicted to go up this summer, and they did. And number two, look at how much it's going up by. I mean, they predicted ERCOT, and I'll show you a little bit later what's been happening in ERCOT, $54 last year to $90 this year per megawatt. I mean, it's a dramatic increase. So my point is, what I'm saying here is what we're managing through in New Braunfels is what's happening in Texas is what's happening in the United States. Here's the other thing and this is the final thing that is driving bills up this summer. May, June, and July, I think y'all know this, they're the hottest months on record. Each individual month's the hottest month on record in our region. And what that has done is it's whenever it gets hot, our business it's very, very weather dependent. If it rains, people don't water. If it doesn't rain, people water. If it's hot, then we have residential air conditioners really driving the use. In fact, I toured the ERCOT years ago, and we were at their control room, and one of the questions was something about what drives load in ERCOT, and he said one thing: residential air conditioning. That's what drives load in ERCOT. And that's what happens when you have record heat for 3 months in a row. So without any of the other changes, with PUC, with ERCOT, with natural gas, bills would have been almost a third higher this summer just because of the load, the air conditioning load, because of the heat. So what's it look like going forward, right? NBU, when's this going to end? We get that question a lot too. And this is what we're thinking right now, based on what's happening in the market, based on what we're seeing in forward prices. You can see that basically what we have here is we have things stacked. I won't go all the way back because I've gone so many slides forward now, but you remember all those bars I was showing you earlier, we had the different components stacked up. That's what this is too, but it shows a look forward of what we think is going to happen. You can see they're down there in red. This is a forecast, like any forecast. It's like forecasting the stock market or any other commodity. Nobody really knows what's going to happen until it happens, but based on the information that we have right now, this is what it's looking like. So how do NBU's retail prices compare? You know, one of the things that the questions we get often is, why is that utility lower? Why is the direct question from one of the folks we gave the presentation to earlier this week is, why is my aunt in Marble Falls paying less? That's a great question. So let me walk through how the retail prices compare and why they're different. What we're showing here are an electric bill using August of 2022 rates. It's an all-in bill. So everything I showed you earlier stacked up in that bar chart, it's all in here. The yellow bars are the electric co-ops in the region, PEC and GVEC. The blue are the municipal utilities, Austin Energy and then CPS Energy in San Antonio. We put Brownsville again because, again, they're just a good benchmark. They're a lot like us. NBU is the orange one. The green one is the average of all of them. And then the red ones on the bottom are what's called a retail electric provider. These are the for-profit, competitive retail electric providers. Now, why did we pick these four? Because there's a lot of them in Texas. We picked these four because they're the largest four by total customer count. So in these competitive areas of the state of Texas, and I'll talk a little bit more about why they're so much higher, but really, ultimately, the difference between these is not Winter Storm Uri, because remember, in August of 2022, there is no winter storm recovery in NBU's bill. This is purely delivering energy, delivering electricity to homes and businesses. So why are there three that are lower? Why are some higher? The reason really comes down to, and the people, these utilities don't publish their hedging strategy. That's not something that they go out and do. It's something they keep confidential, they keep close to the vest. Because it's a commodity market, right? You give it away, then that could affect these utilities' ability to buy power at a competitive price. The reason they're lower right now is because their hedges are longer, right? So why are the red ones so much higher? Because they're a lot shorter. One of the people we gave a presentation to this week, he said, say it this way. I think this, he goes, it makes sense when I think about it as gasoline. I said, okay, well, tell me what you mean. This is what he said. He goes, if you filled up your truck in July, and it's $4.80, right? then the cost of the gas in your tank is $4.80. But if someone comes driving by you, they're retired, maybe they only go to H-E-B and Walgreens and a few other places and church, and they don't get out much. Maybe they filled up in, I don't know, January, February, and they're still running around that 25 gallons that they filled up on. Well, they may have gasoline in their tank that costs $3.20, right? And so the electric market is like that. It goes up and it goes down, just like gasoline. You know, gasoline, if you look at a gas station, sometimes they'll change their prices in the middle of the day. But the opposite's true too, right? You could go, you could have filled up in July at $4.90, and you could go fill up today at $3.30, right? If you still had that two trucks go by, and one filled up in July, well, the gas in their tank is about $4.90, $4.80, wherever they got it. And they wouldn't, if another one went by and they filled up today, it's about $3.20, $3.30, wherever they ended up getting it, right? So the point is, what these electric utilities do and what NBU does is we run these programs, these hedging programs, where the goal is not to beat the market, because that's like playing the stock market with public funds. The goal is to deliver a competitive price and reduce volatility. So if you look over the past years, what I've got here is a residential price comparison, comparing NBU to three other numbers. The green line is the average, and this is the electric rate going back to 2010. So NBU is the orange one on the bottom. The green line is the average of the top 4 municipal utilities in the state of Texas. The blue line is the average of the top, and this is by customer count when I say top 4. The blue line is the average of the top 4 electric cooperatives in the state of Texas. And the gray line is the average of the top 4 for-profit retail electric providers in the state of Texas. So you can see that NBU's hedging program has been the lowest among all of those for all these years. And where we are now is we're now in alignment with those top 4 electric cooperatives in the state of Texas. So when you look at the hedging program and you evaluate it, which is what we do every day, in fact, that's especially right now, the question is, how far out do you buy? So the answer is everything from real time all the way out to about 15 years. And the way that you get a competitive price is you blend those. You make purchases of different lengths over time, given what you know about the market, given how the market behaves. And then what you come up with is, if you blend all those together, you come up with a retail rate. And so right now, yes, we're higher, but when you look at the program over time, it's delivered incredible value. I'll talk more about the program here in just a moment and what we're doing. What this chart is doing is it's comparing NBU's electric costs versus 2 different markets that ERCOT operates. One is day ahead. That means you buy power today for tomorrow, and there's a price that you pay. And then there's real time. If you're buying it, that's what it means, real time, like in real time. If you're buying power in real time, that's the blue line. So orange is buying power day ahead in ERCOT. Blue is buying it real time. The gray is NBU's cost. So this goes back to 2018. You can see this market is incredibly volatile. If you look at the peaks, right? And the point, again, it's not to beat the market, because then you're playing the stock market with public funds. That's not what this is about. The point is reducing volatility and delivering a competitive price. So you can see how close we've been to market, and you can see the protection that the hedging program, the insulation the hedging program provided during some of these key incredible moments. So if you look at the 2021, where there's that bubble that says February 2021, NBU's price during Winter Storm Uri, the blended price of all of our hedges was $329 versus a real-time and ERCOT market price of over $1,800. So you can see what the hedging program is designed to do there. And then you can see, as things got volatile in the ERCOT market, you can see how NBU's price has followed the market, and in some cases been very low compared to the market, such as right now, that farthest bar on the right. While the prices have gone up, you can see that the hedging program has protected the community from these prices that are happening in ERCOT, from the changes that are happening, and also from the price of natural gas. So this is, someone called this earlier this week your rainbow chart. So there's the rainbow chart. And what I'm going to do is take this information and put it in a table, because it's another way to look at the information. If you like tables instead of pictures, that's what this is. Again, we got NBU from 2015 to 2021. We had the lowest retail electric price below Austin Energy, below PEC, below GVEC, below CPS Energy. Those top four there, or the bottom four, at the time, those were the top four retail electric providers. They change so often, and there's so many of them. It's not the same all the time like it is with municipal utilities and co-ops. Here is where we are in August of 2022, and that's basically what I just showed you on the rainbow chart, right? But here they both are on one slide, and here's what I wanted to show you. All right, you can already see the ranking. You already know what the ranking is. That's not the point. What I want to point out is how much each one of these prices went up based on the utility type. So you can see NBU went from 9 cents to 13 cents. Austin Energy went from 9.5 to 103. But look at the retail electric providers. Look at the very bottom one. They went from 13 cents to almost 28 cents, 13 to almost 27. Why is that? It's not because they're bad at what they do. It's because of their hedging program, right? So if you look at a retail electric provider, one of the challenges that they have, well, first of all, there's profit built into those rates, where the others, there's no profit. So that alone makes them higher. But one of the challenges they have is that they don't have certainty over how much energy they have to buy long-term for their hedging program because they don't know how many customers exactly they're going to have. We have a pretty good idea how many customers we're going to have in our community, and so do the co-ops, so do the other municipal utilities, because it's a growth rate that you put in. You know how big, you have a pretty good estimate of what your population is going to be. So when NBU is hedging out 15 years or so, you have a pretty good idea of how much energy to buy. So you can hedge farther out, and that helps. That helps keep the price lower. But these others, they can't do that. They can't do that because they don't know if they're going to have that much energy that far out. And I think that's one of the reasons why you've seen their prices go up so much higher this summer than the municipal utilities and the co-ops. So I put this slide up at the council meeting, and the reason I said we put this together was because what we want to do is show an entire bill for all three services that NBU provides. And it is true that between and including Austin and San Antonio, there are 13 water purveyors. There's a lot. So there are so many permutations we could have come up with. We could have had one for GVEC Electric, Green Valley Water, Septic. We could have had Crystal Clear Water, Pedernales Electric, and I don't know, somebody else, sewer or septic, right? We just picked the big three metros, just the big three, the ones at the end and then NBU. There's two scenarios that we're showing here. The first is a scenario with average electric usage in July. We're applying the August rate. Average residential wastewater, and then water is 6,000 gallons. That is assuming no lawn watering. 6,000 is roughly a number that represents just essential use. And so you can see Austin had the lowest bill, and NBU was tied with San Antonio. If you water your lawn, so the only thing changing between scenario 1 and 2 is water usage at 25,000 gallons. You can see we had the lowest bill between Austin and San Antonio. So what we're trying to do is show the overall operations of the utility and what type of bill is being delivered this summer. Why doesn't NBU have to compete for customers? It's a great question. Let's talk about that. When the state of Texas, about 20 years ago, reformed the electric market, and they did two things. There's two different markets, y'all. There's the wholesale market. That's ERCOT. That's where we're buying our power. We are active and trading within that commodity market. Okay, that's something else. What we're talking about right now is the retail electric market. So when the state of Texas deregulated the retail electric market, it recognized that cities owned their utilities. This city, all of us, the people who lived here before us, bought this utility in 1942. And they've been investing in it ever since. This is an asset owned by all of us. We control it, okay? And so what the legislature recognized is that when that happens, or when you have an electric co-op, if you've read about the history of Texas and when electricity was developed, it was kind of a dramatic, interesting time in the 20s and 30s when these co-ops sprung up in these rural areas. Those members of that co-op own that utility. That is theirs. Their ancestors owned it. They got grandparents and aunts and uncles who were on that board, right? And so the state of Texas said, okay, those markets, those folks have bought it and they own it, they've invested in it. So when they created the legislation, what they did was they said for municipal utilities and co-ops, the governing bodies, whether it's city council or the board for the co-op, they can decide whether they opt into competition, retail competition. and allow the retail electric providers, those are the red bars I showed you on the rainbow chart, have an opportunity to compete for customers. Here's what would happen if council did that. It's an irreversible decision that would be made by city council. So it's up to council, they would decide, but then there's no going back. There's no, okay, we didn't like that, let's go back. It's done, it's over. At that point, all of NBU's electric customers would need to select and then contract with a for-profit retail electric provider to supply the power to their home and business, okay? So those red bars that were on that rainbow chart earlier. NBU could choose, if we wanted to get in that, and we could compete for customers across ERCOT, okay? So let's say you're served by one of those red bars in Houston or Dallas right now. I mean, our board and council might look at that and go, well, why wouldn't you switch to NBU if NBU is competing? And because we've been low for so long, because we were one of the lowest for so long, I actually looked at this about 4 or 5 years ago, did a quick kind of back of the envelope analysis. Should we opt into competition so we can bring in more revenue to the utility? I'm glad we didn't, because I'm not sure how Winter Storm Uri would have turned out, right? I just don't know that you want to do that with public funds. I don't know that you want to go and gamble with public funds that way. So we had that choice though. NBU could take its power supply program, this community service that we're providing, and then compete across the entire state. Or we could just discontinue the power supply program and wind it down. But either way, NBU would still own, operate, and maintain the electric transmission and distribution infrastructure for our community. So those small pieces on those bar chart earlier, that would still be there. But the biggest chunk, the cost of generation, that would go away. And NBU customers would pick who they bought that from. And then water and wastewater would remain unchanged. So let's talk about that, what it means financially to the utilities, to NBU. What you're seeing here is NBU's operating expenses, total expenses for last fiscal year that ended July 31st. The reason I'm putting this up here is because I think in most companies, personnel is usually, depending on the business, personnel is usually the biggest line item, the biggest percentage of expenses each year. But for NBU, it's purchase power costs. So we spend 62% of our budget on purchase power. $120 million, we buy it in ERCOT, and then we just pass it directly through to our customers. No profit, no markup, nothing. It's just this community service that we provide that ends up being the generation on a bill. And then you can see the other line items that go down from there. You can see purchase water, another great example, right? I mean, we purchase electricity, purchase water. Electricity is $120 million, water 6.5, just to show you kind of the scale of the business. All right, what are you doing, NBU? Here's some items that I want to share with you. And let me tell you, we got all these people from NBU here. Like I said earlier, they push pause on their day to come help because they love you and they care about you. That's who this company is. That's who we've always been here. And I hope you'll sense that when you talk to them. Here's some things that we've done so far. You saw earlier, we lowered the PCRA rate. We took out that item related to replenishing reserves for August and September. We're waiving late fees right now through September. We'll continue to revisit it. This is a lot of what we did in COVID because of hardship that folks had. If people call, we're offering, or email or what have you, we're offering flexible payment plans and extensions. Just call us and talk to us. We're going to have folks in the back here today that'll be able to help out with that. We're not disconnecting for non-payment. That means we're not shutting off utilities if people have not paid. And then budget billing has always been there, will continue to be there. If folks want to level their utility bills to an average payment per month, we've always done that, we'll continue doing that. And then help for those in need. This utility bill assistance program, there's been some questions, hey, did this run out of money? It didn't run out of money. What happened was there were so many people that applied for it that the folks at the food bank, who are amazing, wonderful people, if you've not met them, that's an incredible asset in this community. They manage that for us. We give them the money, we budget the money, we give it to them, and they manage it because they have an opportunity to visit one-on-one with folks, and it's not just financial assistance. They have if you haven't been there, I encourage you to. They have a whole array of services at this food bank that they can offer to our folks who need assistance. They just didn't have enough people to take the applications. When we found out about this, we got our customer service team engaged with them. We're meeting with them continually. It is fully funded right now, and we're working with them. Are there NBU employees that we can send to do some of the work that you do to try to level the workload? We also met with the McKenna Foundation, again, another incredible organization in this town. They're just an incredible backstop for folks who really, truly need help. And others to bring all available resources together. So we've already talked about, we just kicked off the fiscal year this month, but we're already looking at If we go through the year and it starts running out of money, we've already found other resources to bring dollars in to keep it from running out. Other resources available, these have always been there. Automatic alerts, folks can program to have NBU's meters send them a notification if they hit a certain number of kilowatt hours they're using or dollars. Conservation, we have a whole array of things available for conservation. Home assessments, we will come to people's homes, we'll do a deep dive in their bill, figure out when they're using water, electricity, and how, and offer opportunities to help. And then rebates. There are rebates that we have, and those assessments also can help identify what could help. And then going forward, there's some things that I want to share with you here. First thing I'll tell you is that NBU did not do a good job communicating what was going on. Despite our efforts, we did not get the word out on what was happening in the market and with bills. And we're committed to get this fixed. I take responsibility for this. And we're going to communicate better on this. We're going to redesign this bill so it's not so confusing. So when any average person looks at a bill, they know what's driving the cost so they can best manage their costs. And that's in process right now. I showed you the proposed line items that we have. We're going to continue working on that and get something launched here the next month or so. Market changes. NBU has been, since Winter Storm Uri, we have been active and engaged in the regulatory changes being made to the ERCOT market through the professional organizations we belong to and others. And we're going to continue our efforts to protect our customers and our community through that work. We've brought in outside expertise. We have a team of 3 separate market experts that we consult with and to navigate the changes in the market to also shield our customers from increased power costs. I just got another briefing yesterday from the resource that we're using specifically to be in tune with PUC and ERCOT and help us know, okay, this change happened, it is happening, it could happen. This is what it would mean to your customers in costs if it did happen, right? And so we can either put together our advocacy strategy around that or put together whatever strategies we need in our hedging program to go about fixing that and addressing it. And then power supply review. This is something that we kicked off before this summer. We solicited proposals and I told the team, I want the best consultant literally in the world. I'm not joking. I'm not saying it to be funny. That's how important this is. I want the best consultant we can possibly find to bring in and do a top to bottom, front to back review of all aspects of our power supply program, our hedging program. And they're doing that. So I've talked to someone on city council and said, hey, you know what, I would love, since we're just now kicking it off, like this month we kicked it off. I would love for them to come to City Council and provide to the council members and also to the Rate Advisory Committee the results of their review. I have 2 short sections here, kind of moving away from electric, but this is a question that came up often. Capital programs. NBU, what are you doing? Why are you spending so much on capital? This shows how much NBU has spent historically on capital. When you think about an organization like us, if you think of capital, if you apply it to your home finances, that's like your mortgage. And O&M is more like cash going out, paying for groceries and that kind of thing. So you use capital to pay for plants and pipes and wires and poles and stuff like that. So if you look backwards, that's how much capital we have historically spent. Looking forward, you can see what the plan is, and most of it is water and sewer. And it's because of there's 2 real main reasons. Number 1 is replacing infrastructure. But number 2 is growth. And I can tell you right now, the Board of Trustees has said very clearly, growth pays for growth. So if you haven't seen the work we've been doing updating our impact fees for water and wastewater, they're going up significantly. So we're taking that through our board. We're going back to the Impact Fee Advisory Committee. Then we'll be at council this fall to present those revised impact fees to help pay for this water and wastewater. And we just went ahead and put it there. Well, the Herald reported this. I saw it on your website here. Well, I think it depends on what's being reported, but we're going to put this presentation on our website. This is it. This is the 5-year financial operating plan that was approved by the Board of Trustees this last June. Summed up by line of business, summed up by total company. We'll put that out there for you. I think that's my last one. The Rate Advisory Committee, there's been questions, what is this and who serves on it? We've never had one before. And we established this, we started talking about this with the board, oh gosh, I think it was late last year, early this year, maybe, calendar year. And the idea was we need to have a group of customer representatives that represent each segment of customer type, not utility experts, customer experts, to come in and give feedback as we're doing 2 things. With the way you design utility rates, this is my last slide, y'all. The way you design utility rates is you look at the cost of service. That's what it's called. That's like an industry term. No profit, just what does it cost to deliver water and wastewater and electricity. And how is that allocated between different customers? Like who's driving the cost and how should it be spread out? And that's the rate design, that's the rate strategy. So you can see that the rate advisory committee consists of 18 folks from the community. They were appointed by the board. 11 of them were nominated by the board because they were based on commercial and industrial customer classes. And the other 7 members, each member of city council nominated a person from the residential class to be on the rate advisory committee. This is a volunteer basis. They're not getting paid. They come to this. It's just a committee they serve on. They're doing their work throughout the fall, and they're gonna wrap it up in late 2022 for consideration by the NBU Board of Trustees and then City Council in the next winter and next spring. They're holding public meetings. They're going to have input sessions, a lot of opportunities to provide feedback to them. That's my last slide. What we're going to do next, like I said, we've got a whole bunch of employees who are here, and we want to be able to answer questions that y'all have so you get the information that you need. We also, if there's a customer here who needs any kind of assistance from our customer service group, Jessica Green, could you wave your hand, please? She's wearing the white shirt. There she is back there. Please see Jessica so you can talk to her confidentially, and she'll bring you over to one of our customer service representatives to help you out. So if y'all could please go through those back doors where everybody's set up back there, and I'll meet you back there too. We'll carry on from there. Thank you for coming.